Pleased to be joined now by the man who will be calling the game for the NFL on CBS this weekend. In that big old 4 o'clock window, Bills at Bucks. It is Jim Nantz joining us here on the show. Jim, thanks for joining us here. We're not going to ask you to play favorites, but I will mention we've got a couple of University of Houston players on the roster. I mean, Ed Oliver and Marquez Stevenson. So, not asking you to play favorites, but just letting you know.
Well, thanks, Chris. You're nice to even take note of that. I've been working on my board all day today. I'm ready to get Stevenson a little playing time. He is a playmaker. At Houston, he did some dynamic things, returned 3 kicks for touchdowns, caught 22 touchdowns. He's a playmaker, and we're proud of Ed Oliver, too, for the career that he had at our school. But excited as can be about this game. This was, as you know, these schedules are put out back in the spring, and CBS is always trying to protect and make sure that it gets certain matchups that it wants to get. We don't get them all. But I can tell you that this one was number one. This was on our number one hit list, and we got it. So here it is. We've been waiting for over a half a year for this game.
So I know you do games all over the league. You get all the top flight games CBS has to offer, and you and Tony have seen a lot of what's going on in the conference, and it is an absolute horse race, not just for the number one seed, but also for just to stay in the playoff tournament. Have you ever seen so many teams so close to being not only in the playoffs, but even the one seed up until Monday Night Football, when the Patriots kind of took off and got a game and a half lead on the Bills? But man, oh man, what a race it is in the conference.
I've never seen anything like it, Steve, and I've been covering the NFL since back in the days when you were playing, since back in the 80s. So it's been a fascinating year. A lot of things that are beyond explanation. Some of the results that came with it. The Jacksonville game down there this year, Baltimore going sideways after a game to Miami, the Jets beating the likes of Cincinnati and Tennessee when they were hot. I mean, you just can't figure it out. And it's got such a long way to go. I know that the Bills Mafia right now is thinking, wow, where are we now after losing that game on Monday night? But, don't forget last year there was a team that was 7-5 that ended up winning the Super Bowl. That's the team that you guys are facing this week, and that's the Tampa Bay Bucks. They were kind of looking like they were in no man's land when they lost to Kansas City on the Thanksgiving Sunday last year. Tony and I did that game. Little did we know we would see that same matchup in the Super Bowl on February the 7th. So a lot to be decided. I'm still waiting for one team to get the hot hand, and maybe that team will be Buffalo.
Yeah, so Jim, with that in mind, knowing you did the Super Bowl last year, what did you hear in your preparations and interviews with the Bucs players in preparation for the Super Bowl that maybe they felt changed for them and put them on that track compared to back when you went and did their game in November?
They just got hot. They never lost again after that game on the last Sunday of November. So they came in on a roll. They came in with playoff road wins at New Orleans and at Green Bay. So they were highly confident. Of course, they had number 12, too. So he'd been in that position many times. I have to tell you, we did not expect the game to be anything like what it turned out to be. We thought this was going to be highly competitive, and both teams would be putting a lot of points on the board. And, of course, Kansas City's offense never mustered anything, and the game was one-sided. And it just was, again, something we couldn't have foreshadowed.
Well, you've covered Tom Brady. You've probably done more of his games than any other broadcaster. That's kind of you got to be at least in the conversation, right? There's no way anybody's covered it more than you.
Actually, Steve, I know the answer to this. I had my 100th Brady game. I believe it was the game in the regular season against Kansas City. This will be our third game of the Bucs this season. So I'm somewhere around number 104 coming up.
Right.
Basically, I've done about 30% of Tom's career, which is amazing. Now, just to give you some perspective, I'm at somewhere in a similar number with the Patriots, with the great majority of that, of course, being Belichick and Brady together. But I'm over 100. And there was a writer in Boston who looked it up. And the second closest play-by-play guy was at somewhere around 59.
Right.
in the high 50s. I'm over 100. And that's all time. That's not just since Belichick and Brady. So, yeah, I've seen a lot of number 12, that's for sure.
Well, what are your? I got to ask you, what are your impressions of him now as this guy who is considered maybe the greatest? Well, the greatest of all time. What are your impressions of him and the evolution you've seen of him? Because he seems like the same guy to everybody. Everybody hates him here, so be careful of what you say because we'll get calls after you get off. But what are your impressions of how he has evolved as a human being, as a player, as a professional, and plus his presence and aura about what it is to be not just Tom Brady, but this TB12 guy?
Yeah, I know. There's probably people don't like hearing the abbreviated version there of TB12, but I think he's the same guy. I think he's not the same player. I think he's actually better. Now, when I say I think he's better than he was that last year that he was with New England 2 years ago. I think he's throwing the ball better. I think he's better than the quarterback that won the Super Bowl the year before that in 2019 when they beat the Rams in the Super Bowl. I think he's at another notch above that. And maybe that's the equivalent of the guy that was playing 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. There is no drop off. And if there's anything, there's an uptick. So, it defies all logic. You know that, Steve. You can't make any sense out of it that this guy's been able to stand upright and they'll absorb a lot of hits except for one in his entire career, that one against Kansas City in game 1 of 2008. Other than that, the guy has been indestructible. And, you would think at this point his body would be breaking down or there'd be some sort of issue. You look at certain players around the league who are always injured. They just can't get 100% healthy. Now, we know he's not really, truly ever 100% because he's able to kind of hide and maybe that's too strong a word, but I think he's able to kind of keep it to himself a little bit when he's hurting. We may not know these things. It's like the knee that he had last year that got operated on after the season. We didn't have any idea of that, but he doesn't complain about it. He doesn't make a big fuss about it. He just wants to go out and play. And, hey, I thought when the schedule landed and we got the game we wanted, this one, I'm talking back at the end of April, that this would be like our Kansas City Tampa regular season game last year. I thought this would be a Super Bowl preview. And you know what? I'm not convinced otherwise right now. I still think this very well could be the game that's going to be in Los Angeles in a couple of months on February 13th.
So, Jim, give us the bird's eye view, because obviously we suffer from Bills myopia here, and fans are concerned after seeing this team alternate between wins and losses for the last 2 months. It does seem on a national level like a lot of people still have a ton of faith in what this team can be with 5 games left in the regular season. So maybe shed some light on that for us from a national perspective, what people think of the Bills as it sits right now.
Well, it's a good question, Chris. I certainly haven't given up on them. I know watching the game on Monday night, it was just riveting watching it. I kept thinking the entire time that Buffalo was going to figure out a way to win the game at the end. I really did. Well, that's going to be some second game coming up on the 26th. But I think what you look at from a national perspective is you look at a great coach in Sean McDermott and a great staff, and you look at number 17, who you couldn't have, this just as far as a football fan, someone that likes to see great young talent come along and have their head on straight. You couldn't have a bigger fan than me for Josh Allen. I gotten to know him a little bit away from football through golf. And he's, I don't have to sit here and extol what his physical talents are or his leadership qualities are. I can just tell you as a young person who's still new at this, new in the league, he's going to be a shining star for the league in so many levels for years to come. And look, Buffalo, you guys got to realize that you're going to be in the mix here for a long, long time. And maybe this is your year, maybe it's not, but it could be next year or the year after that or the year after that, or maybe a combination of those years, because it starts with him. And when you got a player like Dawson Knox, very underrated nationally, I think he's going to be one of the premier elite tight ends years to come. We know that Diggs is already elite. He's in the top 5, top 2, whatever you want to say, as far as a wide receiver. And I like the defense. I mean, I just think there's some great leaders on that defense. And I know they've gone into the draft and gone young, and some of these young guys are producing. And look, the foundation is there. I mean, I'm a big believer in what Buffalo's doing. I'm sorry to say this is the first game that we've been assigned this year. Tony and I don't have anything to do with the game assignments. We go where they send us. Steve, you know how that works.
Yeah.
It's interesting. This is actually going to be our 100th game together with Tony and Tracy and myself. Game 100 is Sunday. So someone did a little study about which teams have you done the most. Again, we have nothing to do with this. But the Bills, I think, were fourth or fifth most of the teams that we've done. That surprised me a little bit because I've always felt like the Buffalo fans that I run into, that they think that we don't get their games all that often. And I hear the same thing from the Ravens. So the Ravens and the Bills were 4 and 5. I'm not sure which order it was as far as the teams we've seen the most. And I expect to see a whole lot more of them, not only the rest of this year come playoff time, but many, appearances in the years to come.
Well, Jim, before you go, I just want one last thing. You've been doing the thing with CBS for so long, and you've crossed over. You do obviously do the Masters, and you've been Sportscaster of the Year multiple times. Give us, or what are the things that you enjoy most? I mean, because I know that people think it's all this glamorous life. Travel is not the best part of the job that you do. I know that, but give us some of the more memorable things and more enjoyable things you like about your job that you've been doing for so long. Certainly it's the relationships, of course, but give us some of the things that you do that you think most people would think, yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think the best thing is I still have that unbridled enthusiasm for being in the arena, just feeling fortunate enough to have a ticket to the game. I can still remember the first game I ever went to. I was 8 years old. It was the first game in New Orleans Saints history back in September of 1967. 8 years old, holding my father's hand, standing room only tickets. I still can feel that day, what it was like. I can still smell the hot dogs on the grills. I can still feel that experience. And I think of it often when I show up into a stadium every Sunday, how fortunate, how lucky I am to be living out the childhood dream. So this is my 37th year now. It's never gotten old. In fact, I think as you get older into it, longer into it, you appreciate it more because you don't have 37 more years to do it. It's such a gift, and I don't take it lightly. I don't start my days without putting my feet on the floor without first saying my thanks in a moment of prayerful introspection. I'm grateful. But then when you get on the road, the joy of getting to have friends in different cities and places you like to go, I still get a kick out of going around and seeing the country and having 2 or 3 visits a year in many of the great places in this country. I haven't been to Buffalo in a while. I've got friends there like you, Steve. My man Hutch that has maybe my favorite restaurant in the country. He's there. Didn't mean to give him a free plug, but he marked this. I love that place, and I can't wait to get to Buffalo. I'm hoping that perhaps before the season's out, we'll get a home game.
All right, Jim.
Thanks,
well,
Jim.
Listen, thanks very much for the time. We look forward to hearing you on Sunday. Bills-Bucs, 4:25 kick. We'll be listening. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate
you.
you.
Chris, Steve, thanks. Bills Mafia, don't be distraught, man. 1 week, it can change. Remember, 7-5 last year. Ended up winning a Super Bowl, and this team can do it. So all the best, everybody.
That's a good one to
guys.
end on. Thanks again, Jim. Jim Nantz from the NFL on CBS calling the game on Sunday with Tony Romo and Tracy Wolfson on the sidelines.